To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryate Yami. And refuge in bodhicitta. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings.
So, welcome to the class this evening. I'm actually, like John, we're both sick. So I'm going to talk for about 45 minutes and then I'm going to have to sign off just because it's a little bit difficult for me. But don't worry, I'm okay and I'm going to live a long life, I hope. So it's not a big issue. Okay, now, so we're talking about spiritual determination. And so we've covered things like, recognize or having a perfect human rebirth, but framing it, because we want to be spiritually determined as I won the lottery ticket of a really good rebirth, and using some of those, emotions that we might have if we won a really good lottery ticket to say, hey, that's me, that's my body. So we get ourselves excited, and that's self-esteem, that's enthusiasm, that's potentiality. We have potentiality. Okay, so that's the first thing in spiritual determination. Of course, normally Guru Yoga would come before that, but we're going to talk about that a little later. So the first is in that. Then all of this is part of what's called the initial scope of spiritual practice. And I may have mentioned this last week, but I just always want to emphasize that sometimes they call it the lower scope. And that's ridiculous, because all this is, the initial scope is getting your life organized. Yes, you might only take a good rebirth, but there's nothing wrong with that, So the initial scope is just my life's organized. I've got good self-esteem. I have potentiality. I know what's important and not important because things are impermanent. Things are always changing. And again, I always like to think of it at the end of my life, all I'm going to be left with is how related to possessions, my friends, or my body. So how do I want to do that? And of course, I introduced the idea, which for me, I just love, is that the next one in line for my stream of consciousness isn't going to know Jhampa, isn't going to know anything about him unless he happens to become a Buddhist again, which I could possibly set up a little bit. But the bottom line is, it's not going to know me. So any positive things I do are presents for that next rebirth. If I do a good job in my relationships, it's a gift to that person to be able to be more capable in their relationships. If I'm generous and create prosperity and such, then that person will also have prosperity. They won't be suffering for a lack of means. And then if I'm doing Dharma and such, I mean, prostrations or just, like every time I see a Buddha statue or something, I recognize or, put emphasis to it, then of course I'm going to have that in the next rebirth. And I think I shared the story that when I was about 17 years old, I went into a Chinese grocery store and had little keychains of the Buddha with his hands up and his fat stomach. And then when I bought it, because I thought, oh, this is cool, the Chinese lady said, oh, if you rub his belly, he'll make you happy. And I went, oh, okay. And I can remember driving my car around, and it was just a little car then. I mean, it was only 18, 19 years old, rubbing his belly, and stuff. So, I mean, I have to say, whoa, that's, some sort of karma there that I must have venerated the Buddhas, because I can say I did my communion, 14 years old or whatever it is, where you get confirmed. And it didn't touch me even a little bit. It's sort of sad. I mean, I think Christianity has a very good message, but just that presentation by that priest just didn't touch me. Whereas as soon as I met the Tibetan Lamas, I went off like a skyrocket. I was like, wow, this is so good, Anyway, long and short, just to say that, we are establishing our initial management, organization of our life. I have potentiality. I know what's important and not important. Then I'm inspired. Okay, and that's refuge. I'm inspired by the Buddha, and that's where it's good to read the story of Buddha Shakyamuni, but do it in a realistic way. I mean, for me, if you follow the story, I mean, Buddha was born, and then his daddy had an astrologer come and do some divinations for him, and then the astrologer started to cry. And the king said, well, what's wrong? Is my son going to die? And he said, no, he's going to become incredible, and I'm going to die before that happens. I'm so sad. So anyway, and then the astrologer said either he's going to become the ruler of India or he's going to become a Buddha. And of course, Daddy didn't like that. He didn't like the idea of him becoming a Buddha. So he said, oh, I'm going to make sure he becomes the ruler of India. But you have to think of it in terms of psychologically, suddenly Dad is scripting your life in a certain direction. I mean, no spirituality, nothing to sort of tweak his interest in what's the meaning of life. Just basically, grow up well. He's really well educated. He's super athlete. I mean, this is the story of Siddhartha. He was supposedly really quite incredible and handsome. And then, by the time he got into his 20s, he basically, won his wife. Not to say that sort of thing, but a contest of all the young princes of that part of India was held for Yodashara, and she was a real knockout, beautiful woman or something, very virtuous. And so he won, and then they married, and then he fathered a child. And then, of course, then he does the 4 trips out of the palace. And maybe I've repeated this, but it's good to make it human, sort of make it more as a human person. Like, he's had an incredibly luxurious life, no challenges. Daddy made sure of that. So suddenly he goes out in the 4 directions in a chariot, and he sees things aren't so good. He says, wow, there's illness. There's old age, there's death. Oh, and there's a meditator. And that tweaked him and said, well, what's the meaning of my life? I mean, I'm going to become, think about it. I'm going to become the king of this country. I've got a responsibility. I've got my wife and my child. I'm supposed to be showing some exemplary sort of quality about myself, But what's the meaning of my life? I mean, I've had everything. I've had the silver spoon in my mouth continuously. And I'm seeing now suffering. I'm seeing stuff doesn't go so well for some people. What's it all about? Why? And then that motivated him to run away. And I mean, I'm sure I talked about this last week, but I like the story in the sense that he ran away and he went and met one Hindu teacher, taught him how to meditate, and then another Indian teacher who taught him philosophy, and then he went off and meditated on his own. But you could say behind him was an angry father and an angry wife and child. Well, not child, maybe not, but the wife. So he had to be pretty darn serious wasn't sort of like, oh, I'm going to sit down and, smoke some ganja, in India because it's India and it's all available and things. No, I mean, he had to be real serious about his life. But that, I think for me, that story is so valid in this, what's the meaning of my life, And he had a silver spoon and he wasn't meaningful. So he wanted to have meaning. Anyway, so that's the inspiration. That's by studying that, we get inspired. We have our spiritual determination. And remember the definition, you'd like to do a comparison to say spirituality isn't like, you live on air or something like that, some sort of very nebulous thing like that. No, if you look at a materialistic person, it's their house, their car, their social standing, how much money they have, or things like that are so important. Whereas if a spiritual person, as Lama Yeshe said, it's inner quality. It's not how much money I have or what social standing I have, it's the quality of who I am. And so therefore, when we talk about, spiritual determination, we're talking about putting emphasis to our inner quality, not to the outside situation. And there really is a wisdom in thinking of it in terms of the say, well, okay, what am I doing? What am I cultivating in this rebirth that's going to be my gifts to the next rebirth? So, let me get some nice things organized, like not have anxiety or stress, manage my life well, try to collect good karma, being generous, being, wise and thoughtful and compassionate with my friends, using my body in beneficial ways for being a positive individual. So all that. So anyway, the refuge in Buddha is a big inspiration, and even more so when you read the Jataka Tales. Actually, the Dalai Lama just did it on the after the Tibetan New Year. There's the 15 days of miracles, and then at the end of that, then whoever the abbot of the monastery is, in this case it was the Dalai Lama, he reads Jataka Tales. Now, it actually is a YouTube video with translation, and I haven't had a chance to watch it yet, but I'm looking forward to doing it. Maybe there's some new stories I don't know. And if you go Google it, there actually are some good stories online. In Thailand, there's some fairly good books about the previous rebirths of the Bodhisattva, his Jataka Tales. So anyway, quite good things again for spiritual determination. I am determined spiritually. I am inspired by the Buddha. Okay. Then karma, then just karma, be careful what the karma you create, how you talk, how you think and feel. It accumulates as time goes by. So you want to try to put yourself in a positive direction, accumulate positive karma. And that's, for example, where, when you see a Buddha statue, I mean, you don't have to throw yourself on the ground or something like that, but to say, oh, wow, that's, and then bring to mind all of the richness of what you understand of, for example, Buddha Shakyamuni, or all of the rebirths he had. So when you see a Buddha statue, it's a rich image that is reflecting back to you, rich in so many incredible things and qualities and such like that. So again, spiritual determination. And then now that actually concludes what's called the initial scope. So if you think about it, I've got potential, I know what's important, I'm inspired, and I'm being cautious, careful, cultivating my karma. Okay, that's the foundation of just being a good person. There's nothing like this sort of, it's low level, like the lower practice of spirituality. No, it's a very real important step. Then on top of that, then you have the middle scope of spiritual practice, and that's sort of when you see a psychologist. That's sort of an example, but like why? Because you do this analysis of your deep nature. What's the basis of my delusions? Well, it's my misunderstanding of reality. And because I misunderstand reality, I exaggerate certain things and want them in my life. And I exaggerate certain things and I don't want them in my life. And then I'm in the cycle of existence, the 12 links and such. So the middle scope, the middle scope of spiritual practice is like doing therapy. We could do it with a teacher, we do it with the teachings, we do it with the Buddha, but we're basically analyzing how we understand things are going. And it is primarily based on sense of self, like my sense of self. How do I function? How is that, how does that work? And when you can take in consideration, again, if you've studied, there's the 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness. Well, the middle scope is really about the four mental ones: feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness. Okay, and so it's an analysis of your sense of self. It's interesting, just in terms of commentary. Again, this comes back to where I always try to emphasize, like, think about the words we use in our spiritual practice. Okay, so way back when, you know, I mean, whatever, 10, 15, 20 years ago, oh, the Buddha has no ego. I mean, that is the most ugly thing that one possibly can say, you know. I mean, it's just such a wrong conception. Because, for example, I mean, yeah, I mean, if you said that, then okay, then you say, oh, the Buddha has an enlightened ego. You know, I mean, even then, I mean, it sort of sounds weird, doesn't it? It's not right. But if you say the Buddha's sense of self, you know, is enlightened, well, that fits, you know, because our term ego has got some sort of like, it's an entity, it's a thing, it's sort of like closed. I don't know, it's got all sorts of connotations, and generally speaking, it's not considered, like, you know, and if you look it up in the dictionary, there's not a lot of positive connotation for ego. So to say that a Buddha is egoless is really, really a bad way to say it. You know, again, like, I mean, it's not renunciation, that's looking backwards. I'm spiritually determined, I'm going forward. Okay, then when the Buddha is an object of refuge in the sense that they're my inspiration. Then when I analyze my sense of self, okay, it's my sense of self that I'm looking at and evaluating and things. And I can have a sense of self. And I mean, again, this is really fun stuff to really reflect on. All of us in this little group here, how is your sense of self? Well, it's going to be on that I'm wearing this shirt today. You know, I feel pretty good. Or you know, I have a joke, you know, for a woman, they look at it and says, oh, I've worn this for 2 days, can't wear it anymore. The guy sort of looks at it and says, doesn't smell bad yet. Okay, I can wear it another day. You know, so that's the way guys are, you know, they're a little bit more easygoing. But the point is that my sense of self is created by the things I reflect off of. It's not like there's some sort of self there, but it's like, oh, I've got some money today. Oh, I'm happy. Oh, I mean, had a good meal this morning. I'm feeling happy. Oh, I've got some nice clothes on. Oh, I'm feeling happy. Oh, it's sunny. I'm feeling happy. So we reflect off of things, and that creates our sense of self, which, I mean, I think that's just really a very logical, intelligent way to look at things. So when we do an analysis in the middle scope of spiritual practice, which would be a deeper thing, like if you went to a psychologist because you wanted to have a better understanding of yourself to solve some of your problems, well, that's the middle scope. So then you're doing an analysis of your sense of self. So the terminology, again, really important. Okay, so my sense of self then, okay, first off, you know, I mean, I don't understand things that are always changing. I don't like that, so I get upset. I don't see that if I do something, it's going to have some effect on me in the future. So I don't really careful with my karma. And I certainly don't see things as interdependent. You know, I mean, all of our destruction of dear planet Earth is because we don't understand we're interdependent. I mean, His Holiness the Dalai Lama always says, no, planet Earth is home. It's not some sort of resource. So again, these are really important ways of formatting ourself in regards to our analysis of our sense of self. So anyway, if we don't understand things they're always changing, we don't understand that there is a continuity of causes and circumstances that create us. If we don't understand we're self-interdependent, you know, relative perspective, then we have problems. But then we say, okay, things are always changing, you know, it's okay, right? So then I get a little bit more flexible. Lama Yeshe did a very nice commentary. He said, nirvana is to be cool, okay? And in Spanish, you can't do it because there's no word, I mean, there's fresca, you know, like you're fresca, and it doesn't work so much, but in English, it works well. I mean, so if you've got delusions, you're hot, you're burning. If you've got some wisdom, you're cool. You know, it works pretty quite well. So nirvana actually means that we're cool. That's, again, has all sorts of connotation, doesn't it? But the point is, we are not hot with intensity. We're not hot and passionate. We are actually a little bit more laid back and cool, relaxed, at peace. Okay, so the definition of wisdom is that it's cool. So when we look at ourselves and we analyze, well, we cool down when we appreciate that things are always changing. We cool down again when we appreciate that we have to be a little bit more mindful of our karma, how are we creating ourselves, you know, and like that. And then we also then become more appreciative of our interdependence. Like we exist because of interdependence. So again, we become, you can say, a nicer person, more in touch with reality. So in regards to the spiritual determination, the initial scope of spirituality is normally defined as spiritual determination. It is, I have potential, I know what's important, I'm inspired, and I'm being mindful of my karma. That's the bottom line, that's it. So my life is organized. I feel good about who I am, what I'm doing. Then a little bit deeper, it's part of a deeper spiritual determination, an analysis of my sense of self. And that's again, it's the word that you want to use. You don't want to use, well, you can say self, but again, that's sort of, it's sort of a little bit isolated, but you say a sense of self, you know, like, again, I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm a little bit sick. So my sense of self isn't feeling so good, you know, but I don't know, it makes it some sort of an object that's approachable. And again, I think that's really important in our spiritual practice, that we see ourselves as approachable, you know, because again, it depends, you know, everyone's a little different. Everybody has their own feelings about certain words. But if we can build up a good vocabulary, you know, of things which are more accurate, that are more in harmony with what we call our spiritual practice, then it's better. So my sense of self, my analysis of my sense of self. Okay, and again, so if I don't understand, I remember the Tibetan word is marikpa, which is then sometimes they translate as ignorance, but it's not the right way to translate that. It's I don't understand. Rikpa is understand, ma is negative. I do not understand. Okay, I do not understand. Things change. I do not understand karma. I do not understand interdependence. And then I make lots of problems for myself. So a spiritually determined person shifts gears or puts himself in the category of trying to develop better understanding. You know, how do I live my life? How do I, you know, motivate myself and such? So there's your second sort of the middle scope of spiritual practice. It's like being in therapy. You're doing it on your sense of self. You're analyzing and trying to come to a better understanding. Now, something that's interesting, and again, some of you may be quite studied, so you know this, but bodhisattvas, if you're on the bodhisattva path, which would be the next path, you know, it's called the great path of spiritual determination, or the great path of spirituality. Actually, you don't put too much focus on the sense of self right away. You look at the sense of, or phenomena, okay? And this is where if you took the 5 aggregates, your body is included in phenomena, and the other 4 aggregates are your sense of self or your mind. So it's important to understand that. So when you do the bodhisattva way of looking at reality, or well, analysis, okay, and they say they're an analysis, they start off with phenomena because they want to lessen the exaggeration of outside phenomena so that they're more functional in being able to help sentient beings. Now, they do need to equally work on their sense of self and with wisdom and understanding and such like that. But they start off with appreciating the nature of reality, that things are always changing. Things are having a continuity of cause and circumstance. Things are interdependent. So they put more focus on the phenomena. If you actually look at some of the teachings, again, it's interesting because like an arhat, they have nirvana when they're in meditation. When they come out of meditation, they have incredible control because they must have had really good meditation to be able to go to that place of personal liberation, their personal sense of self being free of delusion, misunderstanding, and such. Okay, so they are incredible ethics and stuff. But outside phenomena are still the danger. That if they see something attractive, maybe an old seed will come up and they'll say, oh, I want that. Oh, and this is I think it's one of the very first sutras that Buddha Shakyamuni ever taught in the Deer Park. It was called the Fire Sermon or Fire Sutra. And what it is that he said, like he was talking with those monks, and he said, if you have desire and you see an object of desire, you burn. if you hear sound and you're attached, you burn. If you smell something or eat something or touch something and you feel attachment to it, you burn. And so therefore you need to disengage yourself from those. And then you know, in the Theravadan tradition, I mean, again, this is more just sort of like self-liberation. You have to see the world is ugly. You know, the world is not beautiful. The world is full of shit. You know, when you hug somebody, they're a bag full of shit. Or you meditate on their bones or something like that. You know, I mean, all of these things. So, and why? Because when you're not in meditation as an arhat or as a Theravadan practitioner, you are not in meditation. You are vulnerable to being affected by the karmas that you haven't fixed with seeing phenomena. So therefore, because self-liberation, they say it's much easier. I mean, you can get self-liberated a lot faster than you can become a bodhisattva. Okay, but the benefit of being a bodhisattva is huge compared to being self-liberated. So anyway, the arhat in meditation has, you know, clear light consciousness, or, you know, path of seeing, and then they're on the path to learning and no more learning. Now, these are the 5 paths in Buddhism. So those are you know, what they're practicing. But when they come out of their meditation, they have to remember that this world is samsara. It can catch you and it can make you suffer. It can make you deluded. So they only look like 2 yards in front of each other, or, you know, in front of themselves. They are very mindful of their actions and things. And there's all of the rules. I mean, it's sort of fun to read the teachings of what a monk should do. You know, I was a monk for 14 years and stuff. Tibetans are a little bit more laid back about it. You know, they'll do things. But if you go to a Theravadan country like Bangkok, you know, if a monk comes in to buy something, then the storekeeper puts a hanky, like a piece of cloth on the table. And then the monk will put the money on that cloth, and then they'll pull it towards him. If it happens to be a woman. If it's a man, I don't think they really do it, but a woman, yes. So I remember once I was traveling through Bangkok, and so we were in a bus together. I was with another monk, and we were sitting at the front of the bus where the entrance was. And this one lady came running up, and the bus was starting to take off, and she jumped on the seat, grabbed the knee of the monk that was with me. She looked up, and the shock let go, and of course fell out of the bus into the ground. It was horrible, you know, but that's sort of how strict it is. You know, you don't touch a monk, and monks shouldn't touch women. You know, I mean, all these very, very, very sort of rules. Now, if you come to the Tibetans, they're a little bit more laid back about it. I mean, you know, monks don't go around touching women all the time, but they don't have that sense of like so rigid. It's a little bit more the bodhisattva path. Also, generally speaking, you can say the Tibetan monks, I mean, if you're around them, especially the younger, they're all happy. They're all got smiles on their faces and happy and bouncing around and stuff like that. And that tends to be the way they are. So the coming back to the bodhisattvas focus on that the nature of phenomena is always changing. That's their body and phenomena around them. It's always changing. It does have a continuity of causes and circumstances. It's not arbitrary. And then finally, it also is all in a play of that universal ocean of interdependence. Okay, I like to add the word it's all open, meaning it can be influenced. It can be influenced, it can influence us, so that like that. And then finally, it's all empty of any self-existence. So those are the wisdoms that keep you cool in regards to phenomena. You know, if you're in a bad situation, it's going to change. Don't get upset. Stay cool. You know, if something's happening, don't freak out about it, but say, okay, must be some causes and circumstances. Otherwise, I would be affected. You know, I mean, it's so interesting that if you like involved in a situation and somebody says something and it doesn't mean much to you, you don't have any karma in that area. Whereas if somebody says, you know, you're a so-and-so and you react, you've got karma in that area. So that's way to indicate like, oh, yeah, I've got some pretty strong karma here I have to work on, you know, something like that. So the recognition is saying, okay, well, if something's happening, you know, for example, John and I are sick. Well, it's not like, why is it happening? God did it to me or whatever, you know, or it's all, you know, it's those people in the store I went to yesterday. No, it's just, I have some karma and, you know, and yes, okay, I went to a store yesterday, but it's just that in that store, there were some causes and circumstances and I got sick. So today I'm sick. Okay, what to do, you know? but I take responsibility for myself, you know. And again, what's really important with karma is it's not like, oh, you know, I got sick, this is my karma, I should just stay with this, you know, because it's my karma, I have to work it through, you know. No, if we have medicine, that's our karma too. So, you know, if you get sick, okay, if there's medicine for that sickness, go for it. And if it's available for you, hey, you got the karma for that medicine, so you're great, you're lucky. So it's not like karma is a dead end street. I remember in Nepal, close to Bodha Stupa, there was an American lady that was visiting Kopan, and she came down to the village and she was walking around, and there was a man there chopping firewood. And at a certain point, his axe flipped off a piece of wood, slammed into his leg and cut it wide open really badly. And so he's lying on the ground bleeding. And all these Nepalese were standing around just looking at him. And so she says, well, what's happening? He says, oh, he cut his leg. Well, why don't you do anything? Oh, it's his karma. So she, I mean, you know, more dynamic, she says, well, I guess it's my karma to take him to the hospital. And she grabbed him, wrapped his leg up and took him in the taxi, you know? So that's the really important thing with karma. It's not like, oh, I'm stuck in this lousy situation, I can't do anything. No. Okay, something's ripened, you've got a situation, but now you can create new karma. Get yourself out of that situation. That's very, very, very important in regards to how we live our life and looking at karma and things like that. And if you have a problem, then there is a solution, great, you know, you've got that karma, so use it. You know, don't think I need to live this out to the full extent. Something that just the other day, someone wrote me and they said, it's actually, he's got a farm and he has a chicken that he loves. I mean, so it's a quaint, you know, but he's got a chicken and the chicken's is very, very ill. And so he asked me, he said, well, Jhampa, can we, you know, what can I do about this? You know, I mean, do I just let the chicken sit there and suffer and finally die? You know, and there are Buddhist teachers that would say, yes, it's that karma of that being. Okay, now, I don't disagree. I mean, you know, if, you know, I mean, it depends actually on culture. In Canada now, you can have, what's it, medically assisted termination of life, and some sort of a special set of words you can do. Okay, but you just have to have permission from a doctor. You have to be deathly ill and things, and so then you can have a medically assisted end of life. Okay, so if you think about it karmically, okay, you're not like if you kill, like you have a pet and the pet gets really sick. Okay, you can, you know, you should take care of the pet and give it all that it can. I mean, I just spent 5,000 peso on getting my dog's infection in its ear and its teeth cleaned, you know. I have no problem with that. I love my dog, you know, I love my dog dearly. I'll start crying if I think about my dog too much, you know, because I love it so much. He's just like, I come home and he's just so happy to see me. I can't say my wife is always happy to see me, you know, but my dog is always, you know. So anyway, and then, I mean, Lama Zopa is the best one for that. He when he came to Mexico, he went to a retreat center called Serlingba, and Serlingba had this thing of collecting street dogs. And so they had maybe like 10 dogs living in their big sort of retreat compound. It was all fenced off and things, so the dogs were all secure. Anyway, Lama Zopa sat down in the middle of the grass and had all the dogs come up, and he prayed on them and blessed them and touched them with his mala and stuff like that. I mean, you know, giving them a good rebirth, you know, I mean, whether we believe it or not really doesn't matter, but Lama Zopa is just a very, very compassionate man for all sentient beings, not just humans. So anyway, coming back to ourselves, you know, saying mantras with our pets, you know, rubbing them and giving them lots of love. Why? Because they'll like us. And if they like us, that'll be an attraction for them to take a human rebirth, rather than looking for another, you know, a dog, you know, a male and female dog making love somewhere. You know, they have more attraction to humans because we've been really loving to them. And maybe we said mantras in their ear and stuff. Okay, so that's a very good karmic way to have, you know, to have with your pets, you know. And then if the pet gets really ill, we don't